Who do we have with us today?
My name is Lee Naike, CEO of TransUnion Africa.
Great to be here with you today, Lee. Earlier this morning you spoke around financial inclusivity, and one of the key points you touched on was around transport poverty. Why is this an important issue for us to be aware of?
Well, it's a really uniquely African problem. I think in my speech earlier today I spoke about the lack of public infrastructure, and given the high number of unemployment today, we have some 32.6% unemployed, and ultimately we want people to be moving around. We found that in Africa there's a sub-segment of the economy, the informal economy, where people are actually surviving in micro industries. If we can get people to move and to access transport, and we found they actually become productive. And what we found in Africa is that small and micro businesses create further employment, and that drives up the economy. So ultimately there's a strong correlation with financial poverty and transport poverty. If we can find new ways to move people into use cases where they can contribute positively, they self-empower themselves and further contribute to productivity of the economy.
And you spoke about this here today in front of many of the business leaders of South Africa. Is this something you think that the market is aware of, that the government is aware of, the term of transport poverty, or is it something that needs to become a topic that we educate more on?
Well, financial inclusion, I believe, is important. It's well known. I made the point today that of the 17 SDGs at a global level, 7 are enabled by financial inclusion. My job, and many other leaders' job, is to explain what this concept is in real terms. When you combine the hard-hitting numbers in South Africa, it starts to become real. And if we push leaders to blur the edges of their boundaries, then they can participate in a more cohesive way to solve this problem.
And you spoke around the 18.2 million people that are currently in what would be called extreme poverty.
Extreme poverty.
So what role do they play in the automotive sector? Why is that an important number for us to even be considering and thinking about here today?
Well, extreme poverty, and as I mentioned, it's some 760 rands, is a number denoted as the minimum required for you to consume the energy intake you need on a monthly basis. If you look at the high number of unemployment and the high number of people collecting social income grants, some 29 million today in South Africa, the question is, how do you get people to become self-sufficient? Clearly, by relying on grants isn't enough to take what you need to survive at an energy level and to become productive at a household level. So part of talking about the township economy is to provoke the thought that we can create micro industries, that the automotive sector can help enable us in new ways. We can learn from other markets such as India or Rwanda or Kenya, where we can enable small and micro transactions by participating in things like mobile wallet development, creating smaller vehicles where people can move around, maybe a two-wheeler to start their journey into employment and get onto a smaller vehicle, then into a bigger vehicle. But the journey can start in a much, much smaller space, almost crawling before we start to run.
And as I understand, you're the CEO of the Africa division for TransUnion. What kind of knowledge, case studies, experiences can you draw on from some of your global counterparts at TransUnion?
Well, absolutely. Well, there's many use cases even within Africa. Some accountable for 8 different countries, from Rwanda to Kenya down to South Africa. And on a global level, probably the biggest thing right now is the use of alternative data to help better understand consumers. Throughout today's conversation, we spoke about how do you start to see a potential in somebody. Historically, scores and data are very easy to use in making black or white or 0 or 1 decisions. But here we're talking about seeing the potential in somebody. If you contemplate for a second the high unemployment, the number of people in extreme poverty, we'd both like to believe that everybody's got potential. How do we see that potential? So in places like Brazil, Colombia, even in Rwanda and Kenya, we're starting to see ways of better understanding the potential that allows lenders, banks, vehicle manufacturers to better see you as a potential client and not just as someone that's good today, but someone that could be good and even great in future. All of us need someone to believe in us, to have hope in us, and to maybe lean in and put our hand up into our potential.
And almost at the end of 2023, about to head into 2024, and almost halfway through the decade, UN Sustainable Development Goals just around the corner. What are you most excited about in general with TransUnion and the space that you're working in?
Well, one of the biggest things for me at TransUnion right now is the ubiquity of digital. we can really recontemplate how businesses work. If you're thinking about physical brick and mortar and getting consumers to your businesses, that's the way the businesses worked 5-10 years ago, well before the pandemic. I believe there's a new way of working. In fact, digital is the default way. And that allows us to reimagine the way government, businesses and services work. And we start to connect the same way we connect in our social lives in business and transactional terms. I believe we can leapfrog the legacy of challenges that Africa has as a continent and leapfrog into our potential.
Wonderful. Great to speak with you and amazing to hear your inspiring words this morning.
Thank you.
Thank you.